Intersection Magazine Podcast.
Welcome to Intersection Magazine Podcast. This week I'm interested in talking about some of my interactions with the coffee industry. I suppose I'm really not much of a coffee drinker, at least not historically. But that changed when we begin to interact with big names such as Starbucks. They're a global brand that has used their name and their media presence and their physical stores all over the world to get people interested in drinking coffee. So many movies and television series have been created around the subject of coffee, but they've been at the forefront of this subject. But coffee has a history, and those who probably live in Africa or Ethiopia understand that history. My story is a little bit different because when I came to Uganda, of course, I was looking for work, so I was looking for a place where I could use a computer, maybe access wireless services, maybe have a snack as I work. And this idea about the merging of workspaces with restaurants and business places came after a brief interlude at British Council Library. They were probably the first group of people that introduced me to the concept of innovation hubs and accelerators, and maybe what these guys later came up with when they talked about converting traditional spaces into communal workspaces. So the idea about merging an office with a restaurant with a business came from this interaction. Anyhow, in those days there were, at least in Uganda, there was Infocom, and with Infocom you would access the internet using a coupon. All you had to do was get something to drink or to eat, and then the restaurant was obliged to give you either 30 or a 1 hour coupon. And when you turned on your Wi-Fi, you were prompted to put in a code which was provided to you by the restaurant, and then you were able to access the internet. So before, I was able to access the standard maybe cyber cafe, because those were common, but I suppose I was looking for something different. So this is where Cafe Park came in. Back in the day, I used to visit Cafe Park at Parliament Avenue and interact with the manager and leaders there started off really brief, but the conversations started to develop. And they learned a little bit more about what they were doing. So they had a facility at Parliamentary Avenue, and they had one at Garden City. And of course I'm talking about Mrs. Jolie Ngabirano and Henry Ngabirano. And so their space was really instrumental in getting me interested in business and interacting with some of the people that I was working with, trying to understand Uganda and the business operations and things of that nature. But also I got to appreciate the level of excellence that this couple had in maintaining the two facilities and of course expanding, and the ability to integrate their faith into how they run their cafes. Now they were not only providing coffee, but they also had a lodge or place where you could visit out of the city, maybe have a look at the wildlife and maybe take a break from the busy city life. So that is Cafe Pop. The other place I usually visited when I was in the Rugogo area was Good Africa Coffee. That was started by Rugasira. Rugasira was very pivotal in setting up a coffee business, and of course whole process of processing, but a lot deeper than that in terms of engaging with farmers and making sure that the farmers got a good price for their coffee. But not only engaging with farmers locally in Uganda, but also making sure that his product was available in UK supermarkets, some of the bigger supermarket chains in the UK. So his work was pivotal, revolutionary in a sense, that he paved the way for many who were going or were farming or who wanted to add value to the coffee industry in Uganda. He paved the way for people of that kind to progress. Now there was he had a facility at Entebbe Airport, he had one at Capital Shoppers, and he had another one at Rugogo Mall, which I used most frequently. Also was able to get some interaction with some of his waiters and waitresses. I only managed to maintain contact with one, although I bumped into her at a different event. But the possibility of interaction still exists. The other cafe was called Ban Cafe, or coffee shop was called Ban Cafe, and this was opposite Bank of Uganda. Very interesting layout. You walked in and it was, I believe the walls were actually painted black. But they also served coffee, and I believe the person who founded it was also part of the bigger picture, probably part of the association. On Buganda Rd there was also 1,000 cups, and these guys were different because what they tried to do was say, let's get tourists and let's have them visit different farms, let's take them on tours. And this is the son of a famous Buganda chief, Ernest Sempewa. And so 1,000 cups was also an interesting setup that was, as I mentioned, created both to sell but also to tell a story. Now if you visit Cafe Pap right now, you'll find a mural of sorts describing a story about two kingdoms and two kings who were in conflict, and how they used the coffee bean as a symbol of reconciliation and a covenant. And there is some mention of these kinds of covenants in the Uganda culture. It's actually called enkago. Something about the sharing of a bean and the shedding of blood. So the coffee bean is essential in covenants between men, but the story at the facility on Parliamentary Avenue is interesting because it also illustrates probably the strategy that was used by 1,000 cops on Buganda Rd, where telling a story helps or can be a useful method of propelling a business into a successful future. But telling stories is also part of something that businesses need to learn, because people are not necessarily attracted to your products, or people will get excited about your products, but maybe they need to get interested in you as a person, and maybe that's where your story comes in. Now, Under Rugasira is also very interesting because he released a book telling the story about Good Africa Coffee, but also because during his time, or during his tenure, the conversation about aid and trade was at its peak. So what African business people and leaders were talking about in those days was the idea that the continent needed to be weaned from this constant desire for aid and converted into a space where we were trading. So that actually covers quite a number of commodities. So if the same can be said about coffee, the same can also be said about cocoa, cotton. And interestingly, in Uganda's history, the country made a transition from cocoa farming to coffee farming, and for a while actually we went back and forth from cocoa and coffee. But the important thing about the conversation that people like Mr. Rugasira started was the idea that for the continent to develop, there was a need to transition and to talk about fair trade. Now, if you read a little bit about the history of Uganda, you'll find that there are the two types of coffee that are grown here. There's a variety that is grown around the lake, and there's another variety that's grown in the Elgon Mountains. We've had challenges in terms of harvests and exports. I believe the numbers were at their peak in 1989. There was a drive or a move to liberalize the sector, the coffee sector, after the war. That's 1986, between 1986 and 1991. Liberalization took place. The formation of an association or a body to govern, to help structure the system was established around the same time. And then of course there was also the collaboration or connection with an international group that manages the prices of the coffee beans. A little bit later. So it has actually been quite a profitable business, although I believe there was a coffee wilt disease which was quite devastating to the industry. But it's been quite profitable. from what we read, or what I read in on the internet, the industry, or the coffee industry, was under fisheries and agriculture, which I believe at the time was led by Bright Ngabirano. So that's a little bit of history in terms of the coffee industry. We're at a pivotal point in time where quite a number of people stand a chance to profit, but also there's opportunities, or the situations where quite a number have also made quite some substantial losses. On social media, maybe about 3-4 months ago, there was a debate about some projects and some funding that came in for the industry that was allegedly misused, and so there's a conflict taking place. Hopefully that will be resolved soon. There are quite a number of prominent leaders who are involved in this back and forth, but because of the history and leadership of some of these leaders, we believe that the industry is in good hands. For this podcast, I have played some sounds from the facility as I visited it maybe about 2 months ago. When I visited it in the earlier days, you'd hear the sound of grinding as the beans went through the machine. And I think that provides an interesting backdrop, as well as, of course, the sounds of people doing business and snacking, or plates and cutlery, waiters going back and forth. That's actually my take, or my interaction with certain parts of the coffee industry in the country. If you get a chance, please visit some of the facilities. Unfortunately, Good Africa Coffee is no longer in Rugasira Mall, and some of the others like Bar Cafe is also no longer there. There have been new entrants into the industry. If you visit your supermarkets, you'll find quite a number of well-packaged coffee products, but we can say that the best is yet to come. So Cafe Park is located on Parliamentary Avenue. There's also Cafe Park that's located in Tinda at the Shell opposite the big hardware store. The team there is quite experienced, and they have great service. For those who are interested in a little bit more, you can go online and look up the coffee industry. There's a Wikipedia page that has quite a lot of information. But also you might appreciate some of the history, finding out which the most important historical organizations that have been in charge of uniting farmers, or maintaining standards, as well as, of course, international treaties or organizations that control prices. What's also going to be interesting is, for those of you who are farmers, is observing geography and politics to see how, for example, the current challenges in our neighbor Kenya could affect prices or could affect demand for products in Uganda and elsewhere. That said, we pray for a resolution, a quick resolution, a quick, well thought out resolution for the challenges in our neighbor country, because some of us were raised there. Anyhow, thank you for listening.